Kia ora, Jon. How are you today?
I'm great, Esther. Thank you. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Where are you joining us from?
Oh, I'm joining from our our southern retreat down just south of Kingston, looking out our living room window / my office at a little bit dusting of snow on the ground. It's great.
A
Nice and warm
wild,
inside.
windy day today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us. So I've interviewed a few candidates so far, just wondering why I chose to do this, but it's my gift to the community. There are 25 to get through, but it's, I guess, an opportunity for our community to just kind of see a more human view of each person and you know, what you bring to the table. So let's kind of start with what made you decide to run, bearing in mind that you've run before, and maybe just give us a little bit of an overview of that.
Sure. Yeah. It's an interesting process of deciding to run for council this time around. I really enjoyed running for mayor, and it was really interesting experience. It was pretty close, you know, and but increasingly seeing how the council is being led, both politically and in executive sense, then it's the desire and calls from others to get involved somehow and try and help move that to a more positive and inclusive context just kept growing. And interestingly, you know, so, you know, my partner in all of this is my wife, and her views on this are important, not the least that she's a healthcare professional too, and seeing those issues play out. But she's been very supportive. She's increasingly frustrated seeing what's happening in this context. You know, it's also really important that both of our adult children also live locally. Our daughter lives in Queenstown, works in the tourism industry. She's a marvellous job. And our son lives on the property here with us and works in tourism locally too. So, although he's creative bent as well. So thinking about the future, you know, where is all of this, the experience of what's happening in the Southern Lakes, going to get us? And if we carry on the current path with the way the council is leading things or enabling things or just letting things happen, it isn't good enough. And so I feel that my background of working in crisis contexts, and you've got to say, I think, that Queenstown Lakes District Council is an organisation in crisis in many ways. Not always, because doing some really good stuff as well, you know. So you've got to get, and some great people working there, but they're limited in what they're able to do because they're not being well led. There's no vision, and you know, my vision for our communities is something that's more sustainable for the people who are looking to live here, and those who've been living here, some for, you know, multiple generations as well. So I don't get a feel for that in much of what the council's doing these days. And I think we need to get back to that. And I think I can bring something to that.
Okay, so let's just delve into that just a little bit then, which is a slightly different angle than some of the others, because last election you ran for mayor, and as you say, it was incredibly close. You've decided to run as a councillor this time. Do you want to just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I think it's important that there are people who are running for mayor who offer something to a more positive approach than has been the case with Glyn as the mayor. And so, you know, we've got a couple of candidates. Although when I made my decision to run for council, John Glover was the only other candidate. I think John's got a lot to offer. Darren Rewe put his name forward. I think he does as well from a different perspective. Both of them are are quite collaborative workers, and in particular the work that John Glover's done with Shaping Our Future in Queenstown Lakes, Central Otago, Southland. So he's done a lot of that. And so I didn't want to step into a mayoral race that would mean that it would make it more likely that Glyn would come out on top, because I think we need change. Glyn's done the best he can, not good enough. So I'd like to see someone else do that. But I also think that's critically important, and you know this because you've been there, that the councillors have the opportunity to influence that, how that team works, and it should be a team. The feeling, at least from the outside, and talking to many of those who have been councillors, or are currently, is that it hasn't really been a team. There's attempts to do so, but that there hasn't been leadership provided by the mayor in that sense, and enabling people to express their views, representing their communities of interest. And when people do express differing views, they're not respected by the mayor, because that challenges his intentions or what the interests that he's representing. And so, whereas, I think that it's important that everyone, or as many as possible, sitting around the council table, including the mayor, take an open, positive and constructive approach to allowing those different views to be expressed, and that there's actual debate, because there's no clear answer to many of the problems that Queenstown Lakes faces, particularly the council. So those problems need to be delved into to understand not only what the issue is that's on the surface, but what are the processes or tendencies within the organisation that have got them to that point, so that better decisions are made. It's not just needing to have a council that works together more cohesively than the current council has been, but they need to make better decisions, and they need, to some extent, through the mayor, but really the council's only employee is the chief executive, and the chief executive should be leading in particular his executive leadership team in a way that the council wants. When because I've had the opportunity to, with my work has allowed me to attend quite a few council meetings personally, which I find an interesting experience, but also post-COVID, most of this is online. So got to see that dynamic where we often see councillors being managed by managers rather than managers being governed by the council. So that we need to change that dynamic so that the views of the community, and these the community, are reflected through their elected representatives, and management put that into effect. That's not what we're seeing at the moment.
So if obviously you've chosen to run as a councillor, not the mayor this time, I guess, what qualities do you think that people that are standing, candidates that are standing, need, and that you need to bring? Because much of my kōrero has been about the idea that your political stance is not as important as your ability to collaborate and negotiate and broker really challenging decision making. So
yeah.
I personally feel that an individual's ability to be able to look beyond themselves and their own value system, negotiate and collaborate, is the fundamentals of the job. Yep. So what do you think that you bring as a councillor, and how can that complement the mayor, whoever that is?
Yeah, we've seen you trying to do that, Esther, and that's been great. You put in a real effort, and so have some others. So my background and experience has been in, predominantly for the last 30 years, working in relatively high pressure situations with groups of diverse leaders dealing with current and future problems, and putting the community at the centre of deciding what needs to be done to address those current and future problems.
So just to be explicit for listeners, your role is what? Your current role?
So yeah, my role at present, so formally, my title is Capability Development Manager at the Joint Centre for Disaster Research at Massey University in Wellington.
Okay.
So the focus of my work is building leadership capability in business as usual and crisis leaders in emergency and risk management in New Zealand and from time to time overseas as well. So it's in those crisis situations, but also understanding risks. So and a wide range of risks, not just natural hazards, which some people might often think that is the focus of my work. It is partly, but in all of those contexts, it's bringing diverse groups of leaders together to look to support one another to reach the right decisions. And in most of those cases, there's someone, or maybe sometimes in a joint way, there's several people in roles like a mayor or senior executive, So increasingly there's shared roles, which is an interesting, sort of contemporary development. So how do we do those things together? And the ability that I bring to that is to take a really inclusive and calm approach to the problem, because you can't control the problem, but you can control how you react to it and how you approach it. And we've seen often, I think, in some of the really hard decisions that the council's had to make over the last 3 years and probably before that as well, where either emotions have got in the way, and that's understandable, but we need to look to reduce that by taking a more supportive approach and respecting one another more. And that there's a need to don't let ideology get in the way. So, and I think you did right about politics, the distinction between sort of political views and what the needs of the problem are. Because I find that local government works best when party politics has little, if any, involvement, because we've got often really pragmatic problems to deal with. And political theory might inform that. Political connections definitely help. But we have the reality in New Zealand, of course, we've got 3 years central and local government term. Central governments change. So you have to be adaptable and be able to relate to those players.
And I guess just to interject, if I may, it's great to hear that. I think there's a very pragmatic approach to that. But I guess the other thing that I would just mention, and we all know, is that political mandates come from central government, and whether it's an actual mandate or whether it's a very strong direction, they of course influence. So it is highly political, and it is actually party politics as well, and it has been for like a decade, flip-flopping. Let's use water as the obvious kind of case there. So you're grappling with that all the way through. So I think political ideology does play into it, but it's from my point of view, like if we use the water services delivery model and looking at a CCO model, a council controlled organisation, when I looked at the evaluation approach to a CCO, I ideologically don't believe in CCOs. So I'll put that out there. I don't believe that they're the right direction forward for our communities. That's my political ideology. After I saw the evaluation, I changed my mind somewhat and thought, I can see the value. We have failed in local government for a long time, for decades, in terms of protecting our water in all of its forms. However, I landed on we're actually throwing baby out with the bathwater, and I don't believe that the CCA approach is the right way forward. I voted against it. However, that is a very clear direction that we have little control over currently, beyond choosing the in-house model. And so I suppose in terms of using that as a case in point for our community, one of the discussion points around all of that very long debate was, well, people don't care unless their tap doesn't turn on, or unless the quality of the water is making them ill and they have to go and buy water. But that is the point, right? It's like, that is the most fundamental, crucial and important part of what council currently does. And people do care when it turns bad. And we have to, what we choose to do today will prevent or, you know, cause those irreversible effects.
Quite. So, yeah, I think even more importantly, because that, although who knows what's going to happen over the next year, how far will that process go? And now, but in the meantime, the next council and next chief executive and executive need to do the best they can to get the best out of that for the communities. Because yes, you're right, the water services are a key part of it. People won't worry about it until they don't have water or they're unable to flush their toilet or whatever. However, they will also feel it when they get their first water services bill, which is going to be probably appreciably more than they're paying now and will be for some years' time. So that's a reality. So how does the council, still owning this council-controlled organisation, essentially a company, how does it ensure that the right direction is given to that organisation to best meet the needs of the community? And that's going to be a real challenge over the next few years. The dynamic within which that decision was made recently, where there were threats made about what was going to happen from central government perspective with commissioners being sent in. Well, I will imagine over the next few years there will definitely be central government involvement in establishing those entities. That's probably a given, actually, because it's a big ask. And so therefore the next council is going to have to be, I think, more constructively and honestly engaged with government and pushing for the needs of our communities in that mix than has been the case so far. There has been a view that, we just need to go with it because that's what the government is saying. Well, we've seen other local authorities who have pushed back quite firmly in relation to water services in particular, and they've got a better outcome than we're currently looking to be dealing with in Queenstown Lakes. So we need to be able to have honest, sometimes quite difficult conversations with central government about how this is going to work. Because the way it's currently structured, and this is true of many things happening here in Queenstown Lakes, that it's assumed that the trajectories of growth that are being used based on current experience and property sales and consents and fast track proposals, etc., are suggesting that we're going to need even more investment in infrastructure because there's going to be increasing demand on that. Well, on the one hand, as a council, we don't have to buy into that to that extent. We can say that, well, the current rates of projected growth are actually unmanageable. They're unaffordable for our communities. So we need to be more proactive in how we manage that. So, and that's pretty well commonly held view in our communities. Not exclusively, but it's pretty strongly held. So we need to do that better. And so, but to be able to do that, we need to do it as a team and enable, because most of the negotiations tend to happen with the mayor and maybe some, probably what I'd like to see in the next council is see more councillors actually have roles where their skills and capabilities sit to be able to assist with that, rather than it sitting almost exclusively on the shoulders of the mayor, as has been the case this time. A more inclusive approach there would help, and the councillors would feel more valued and listened to in it. And through that, our communities might feel like they're being listened to as well. But this expectation...
And much of what you've talked about is obviously been stuff that we have strongly advocated for.
Yep.
And I would also say that some councillors do play a quite significant role. So it's just variable. And I think that's based on a number of things, not just leadership. So I'm just going to take a slightly different approach now, rather than delving in too deep into some of those issues. Ego. What role do you think ego plays in local politics, if any?
it's interesting looking at the range of candidates that are running, particularly some of those who are running for mayor, because they're doing it because they, I think, because it's unlikely that some of them are going to get elected, and they've run before, and so they're doing it for reasons that would probably be mostly about ego, or maybe they think that change will happen, and from their perspective, that's.
And what about you? Do you have an ego?
Oh, of course, everyone does. I think anyone particularly who stands for elected office, has to, But as I was, describing at the outset, I'm busy enough, with my work, both around the country and with the little tourism enterprise that we've got working here. But I feel that I could make a difference, and that's what drives me in pretty much everything that I do. If we need change, we need positive change. We need to enable our communities to feel like they're being listened to and that their needs are being better met. And I feel that I could do that. Would I get a kick out of it if it all goes right, or goes better than it would otherwise be? Sure. Would my ego be dented if we didn't achieve it? Yeah, probably to some extent. But at least we need to try, and as you say, there's some councillors in the current council who've tried really hard, and in fact they all are in their own ways. But I think we need to align what the council is doing more with what the community wants, and so if we can make that happen, even if we just try, that would be good for my ego. But it will also be good, I think, for the egos and the well-being of our community members. And I think that's more important. So in these sort of situations, and this is a key part of the training and leadership development that I'm involved in, you have to be able to step back from these sort of situations. And you can't remove your ego from it, but you can make sure that you're looking at the wider perspective and considering others, because it's not about you. It's about the outcomes that you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. So let's kind of leave this with some parting thoughts. I did frame the question originally and 3 years ago in terms of what could possibly go right, which sounds somewhat cynical, but it's that equal measure of there's a lot against us, actually,
yep.
But there's a lot that we can do. So in your view and your kind of parting comments to the community, what do you think what can possibly go right?
Yeah. Some of it's about process. It's about ensuring that the community feels that it's, as I've said a few times, I think in this discussion, that they feel that they're being listened to and valued, and that doesn't happen at the moment. In fact, there's a lot of consultation going on at the moment, probably too much, really, and as we see in some of those, the consultation happens, community expresses their view, sometimes overwhelmingly, and the council makes a different decision. So that's problematic. So we need to, I think, take a different approach to how that happens. So what could go right in that case is that there are real opportunities for members of our communities to get involved in shaping the future decisions of council and other decisions around it. Because, the local authorities are important, but they're not the be-all and end-all. There's a whole lot of other decisions being made in our communities and outside of them. So we need to, I think, better connect with our communities. Okay. And that will then, I think, result in better decisions that will mean that there will be, as our communities evolve, there will be less congestion on our roads. We will have better services. We'll have better water services, ideally. Well, some people would say you couldn't get worse, but that would be too hard. But we could do those things better. We could have influence things like our health services. We could have a much more joined up and effective, accessible public health service in our communities if our local authority worked better with our partners to ensure that those things happen. Even though health isn't a local authority responsibility, the needs of our communities are. So what could go right would be that we would have better outcomes for our communities and more sustainable future, that people who are looking to build their lives here or continue their lives here feel more comfortable in doing so, and that they feel that they're making a positive contribution in it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time today. We'll leave it there, but I think we've delved into some great stuff. So appreciate you standing again and wish you the best. Thanks,
Thanks
Jon.
very much. Cheers.